Dawn drips off the rocks like glass. The water holds its breath. A woman's face breaks the surface, blue lips, wide eyes, tide climbing her throat. A black fin slices past her shoulder and disappears as if the ocean swallowed its own shadow. She is sure this is the end. Then the mass returns beneath her, not ramming, not biting, lifting. Her body rises on a living back. She slides onto slick skin. Cold burns her lungs. The fin leans her toward the kelp line. She clutches the stalks like ropes. The whale holds steady, eye turned up, watching. Keep watching. Because the day an orca saved a drowning woman did not end at the shoreline. It opened a trapdoor under a small town and showed what lived underneath. If true animal mysteries and human secrets are your thing, subscribe now. You won't want to miss where this goes. Her name was Maya Jensen, 31. Biology teacher at Greyrock High in a town that sits where Washington's cliffs meet the Pacific like a jawline. She lived in a cottage that smelled like cedar and coffee grounds, with a lemon tree in a pot that never quite believed in the climate, and a porch where she hung wetsuits like flags. Most mornings, she ran the point trail before first light, headlamp on, breath fogging. Some mornings, she stayed with the ocean until it turned the color of hammered steel, and the gulls started arguing about breakfast. She was one of those people who measure life by the water temperature, who can tell you within 2 degrees what the tide feels like on the bones of your ankles. She also had a habit of saying yes when the coast asked her for favors. Pick up the plastic nurdles by the ferry dock. Log the first sea nettles. Flag any dead birds for the strandings team. It wasn't a job. It was a promise she made to the place that raised her. 6 months before the day the orca lifted her, she and 2 volunteers from a ghost net project cut a web of monofilament out of a kelp bed in the North Cove. Seals watched with black marbles for eyes. Salmon scales shimmered on the line like confetti. The net had trapped a juvenile orca around the tail flukes. A female, maybe 9 feet long, traveling with a small pod. The whale watch crews called the shadow line because of the way the matriarch's dorsal fin hooked like a weathered scythe. Maya remembered the eye, close enough to see her reflection reduced to a fleck. The pup didn't thrash, didn't panic. It hovered, ribcage pumping, trusting the air to keep being air. They cut until their hands blistered. The rope came loose like a breath you didn't know you were holding. The young whale pulled away and pressed its flank once, slow, against the hull. Talyan Guyan, the captain who'd ferried them out, muttered dateless words that tasted like prayer. They named the juvenile Sable because of the ink-dark saddle and a nick in the trailing edge of the dorsal, thin as a carved signature. The pod moved on. The ocean healed its shallow cuts. A story folded itself into town talk. The teacher who helped a whale. In Greyrock, you were careful what stories you let settle on you. They matched to you like moss. Then came March and a day with air that bit the teeth and light that made the sea look clean even when it wasn't. Maya woke at 4 to a text from a number she didn't save. North Cove just before sunrise. You'll want to see this. Come alone. R. She stared at it in the kitchen while the kettle hissed and went quiet. The initial could have been Riley Park, her friend with the camera and the drone who posted tide pool clips like movie trailers. It could have also been Rick Pike, who ran a salvage outfit that took contracts nobody bragged about. Or it could have been someone who knew she couldn't resist a mystery. She didn't tell her husband. Aaron Jensen worked charters out of the marina and liked the noise of people. He also liked control, and secrets were how you kept a little of yourself when control got too tight. He snored in their bedroom, one arm flung over his eyes. The kind of sleep you earn on the water or by never asking yourself hard questions. Maya left a note by the coffee pot. Went to check the tide bowls at North Cove. Back by 7. M. A lie bent at a right angle, the kind that lets you see 2 truths if you squint. She drove the ridge road with the headlights swallowing and spitting back fog. An owl skimmed the center line and disappeared into fur. The radio was only weather and static. At the pullout above the cove, she killed the engine and listened to what the world sounds like when most people are asleep. It is not silence. It is breath and shuffle and drip. It is a place readying itself. She took the goat path down to the pocket beach with a little flashlight that made the rocks shine like coins. Foam slid up, slid back, kelp dragged swirls in the low tide sand and then let them go. The cove was a teacup of basalt with a narrow mouth that faced the open sea. At certain swells it sang, at certain winds it kept secrets. No one waited on the beach, no R, no human at all, only a shape out beyond the mouth. 2 shapes, 3. The smooth, sure sickle of orca fins. Farther out near the deeper water, a bull rolled, dorsal leaning like a bent blade. Closer in, a smaller fin, triangular and precise. Sable. Maya felt it before she thought it. Something off. A rhythm in the water that wasn't feeding and wasn't play. The pod moved in a slow, deliberate arc that held the mouth of the cove like a gate. She stepped to the swash line and let the tide lick her shoes. A swell lifted, glassy. And there, in the lift, a flash of red. Not a fish. Fabric. A life jacket skinned off a body. It rolled, then vanished under the next curl. She didn't remember deciding. She left shoes and coat on the rocks and waded in up to her knees. The Pacific in March punishes the casual. Cold jumped up her spine and clamped her ribs. She pulled the jacket of her wetsuit up over her shoulders and zippered it with fingers already going dumb. The red flashed again and she dove. The first shock of the water ate her breath. She surfaced, inhaled sharp air, dove again. She reached the jacket just as it tipped and opened its throat to the down. Her hand closed on nylon. It yanked. She yanked back. Weight pulled from below. Not a person. Something attached. The jacket acted like a flag tied to a stone. Her bare toes found smooth rock. She pushed. It slipped. The flag sank. She reached again and caught not nylon but line. Braided. Thin. Foul with the stink that never quite lets go of diesel. She followed it down with one gulp of courage and half a breath. The line led to a duffel jammed in kelp and stuffed with something heavy, rectangular edges pressing the canvas into angles. She needed air. She let go and broke the surface into dawn that was finally deciding what kind of light to bring. She spit salt and took 3 fast breaths, fast being both mistake and necessity, and dove again. This time she didn't try to lift. She worked the knot on the jacket strap with her nails. It was zip-tied. Of course it was zip-tied. Her fingers went to her teeth without permission. She bit the tie. Plastic bit back. She chewed through like a beaver gnawing winter, and the end snapped with a taste of cheap oil. The jacket popped free and scooted up, bright as a flare in the green-black. Something moved behind her and the line went slack. She didn't turn. She pushed for the surface and hit it wrong, cheek first, swallowing a mouthful of brine that scalded her sinuses and made lights pop. For a breath, she forgot which way was up, and the body does not forgive that mistake in cold water. It convinces you to rest, to let go, to sink. A dark shape rose under her like a slow submarine. A broad head, white jaw patches, the ancient geometry of black against white. Sable. The young whale nudged her thigh. Not hard, not curious. Firm. A lift. The water around them spun into a tight, organized roll. A swirl that was not wave and not eddy. A handmade current. Maya slid belly down across the rubbery back, hands flailing for purchase on a surface not built for humans. The whale held steady, turned toward the inner cove, and pushed. Maya's chest hit kelp. She grabbed. The slick, cool straps of another world. She hooked crooks of seaweed like fingers. Sable rose just enough to press her closer. Then the whale backed off with a glide, eye open, white patch nearly glowing in the new light. Maya pulled herself onto the weed and then onto rock. She turned and saw the red jacket bob in a triangle of foam near the mouth. The line dangled, then whipped once like a tail and was gone. Out beyond, the pod shifted. The bull dived in a long, elegant fall. The matriarch with the hooked dorsal drifted parallel to the cove mouth like a gatekeeper. Sable rolled on her side as if to show the slice on the trailing edge that Maya knew without needing to see. She lay on her side on the rocks, coughs tearing her throat raw, lungs driving air like bellows too small for their bodies. She didn't realize she was crying until the salt of tears turned to fire. A skiff rounded the point, slow, cautious. The name on the hull read, Ruthie Ray. Talia's boat. A horn would have felt vulgar in that moment, but the way the hull nosed in said everything. Talia stood at the bow, hood up, eyes narrow, scanning for permission from the sea itself. When she saw Maya, she didn't shout. She tied off to a ring in the rock with fast, neat hands. Nick, her deckhand, hopped with a line and a look that tried to hold both fear and professionalism in the same face and failed. Talia's hand on Maya's shoulder was the kind of touch you remember years later when you tried to explain grace. "We've got you," she said, voice level, like a bar across a window. "We've got you." "Red jacket," Maya said, voice shredded. "Duffel, line, out there." She pointed with a shake she couldn't control. Talia followed her finger. The pod had fanned into a crescent outside the mouth. Sable cut across and back like she was drawing a shape. "I know," Talia said. "You texted me?" Maya asked. It came out like a cough. Talia's head shook once. "I didn't." Nick wrapped a blanket over Maya's shoulders and it stung like needles and love. They lifted her into the boat. She watched the water over the gunwale the way a person watches a crowd for a face they just met. The bull surfaced far out, breath rising like a curtain torn by the hand of a god. Sable popped up close and rolled to look at Maya with a gaze that was not a mirror of human intelligence, but was something just as deep and at least as old. On the ride to the marina, the town stood up around the boats like it had not slept either. Dog planks slick with light, crab pots stacked like grim little monuments. A dog looked at the water as if it expected news to arrive by tide. When Talia tied off, 3 people who weren't supposed to be awake were already there. Sheriff Darius Cole, who had a voice like Riverrock and carried the town's griefs as if they were his actual job description. Nurse Yolanda Graves, who didn't need a hospital to triage, just 2 hands and a way to make time behave. And Maya Jensen, hair smashed from sleep, eyes sheened by the shock that comes not from not knowing but from knowing before you arrive. The moment Aaron saw the band of raw red around Maya's ankle where the line had burned, something flickered in him. It wasn't guilt, not yet. It was math. "What happened?" he said. Not a question. A demand lodged inside a family habit. "Ask the ocean," Maya said, because the truth needed to gather itself and order its own steps. In the ER, they warmed her core with blankets and soup that tasted like salt and gratitude and cheap chicken. Fingers came back to life, feet prickled, and pain arrived not like a truck but like a series of small, intimate apologies. The doctor spoke about cold shock and afterdrop, and how nothing keeps the Pacific from being the Pacific even if you love it personally. Sheriff Cole asked the questions he needed to ask gently, like a man setting down glass on a table that isn't his. "You saw the line before you dove." "I saw the jacket first," she said. "Then the line attached to a duffel." "And you were alone?" His pencil hovered as if the lead needed permission to be blunt. "I got a text," she said. "From maybe Riley, maybe Rick Pike. It said to come. I didn't think." "Can I see the text?" Maya reached into the pocket of her jacket and pulled out her phone in its rubber case that claimed to be waterproof and turned out to be optimistic. It lit. Bless the engineers. The text was still there, sent at 3:57 a.m. The number had no name attached, just the 7 digits and a county code. Sheriff Cole wrote it down. 2 hours later, while the day put its shoulders under Greyrock and lifted, a groundskeeper mowing the path along the North Cove noticed something that didn't belong on the black rocks at low tide. A phone in a clear pouch with a broken lanyard caught among bladder wreck. He fished it out with a rake. The lock screen showed a young woman sitting on a skiff, hair whipping, grinning with her mouth wide enough to swallow the sun. The date stamp on the photo was November. Her name, when they charged the phone and coaxed it awake, was Piper Hale. 19. Missing since December. Last seen leaving the old salvage pier after an argument everyone heard and no one recorded. This is where Greyrock's breath hitched. The last time anyone saw Piper was with a man in a knit beanie and a jacket that smelled like fuel. A man who worked for Rick Pike. A man who told the bartender that kids today were all drama and no spine. The thing about small towns is that information doesn't flow, it seeps. It rises in the seams where sidewalk meets story. By noon, the town knew about a red jacket, a line, a duffel, and an orca that had propped a human back onto life like a librarian saving a book from a puddle. By 3 in the afternoon, hashtags had moved in. Orca Angel, or Sable saved her. Shadowline Saints. A whale-watching couple from Boise posted drone footage from the mouth of the cove. It wasn't perfect, fog is a critic, but you could make out the arc of the pod in formation like a punctuation mark on the water. You could see a red flash, you could not see a duffel, you could not see the hand on the other end of the text. Sheriff Cole called the Coast Guard. Divers went down at slack tide. They found nothing on the first pass, which is not the same as finding nothing. The ocean specializes in putting the most important thing 6 inches to the left of where you look. That night, Maya slept sitting up on her couch because lying down made her feel like the floor was water. She woke at 2 to the sensation that the house was too quiet. Aaron was awake in the kitchen, talking to someone on the phone in a voice so low it sounded like gravel deciding whether to become road. He didn't see her in the dark of the hall. She didn't move because something old in her told her that quiet was a better witness than confrontation. I told you she was out of it, Aaron said. She said she fell in. She's not going to make trouble. A pause, the flavor of listening. No, they don't know about the duffel. They found a phone, but not the thing. Another pause. I'll handle it. Handle what? When you live with a person, you get used to the way their words wear clothes. You know when you're hearing formal, casual, remorseful, hungry. This was a suit she hadn't seen him wear. It didn't fit his shoulders. It fit too well. She went back to the couch and pretended to be asleep because you think best when your face looks still. Morning came in with rain that made the shingle roofs shine, and the harbor ferries look like toys in a bathtub. Talia showed up with scones the size of fists and information the size of a town. The pod was still out there an hour ago, she said. No hello. Sable kept pushing the same orange mooring buoy with her rostrum, like she wanted me to look. I did. Nothing obvious, but I'm not crazy. Maya put her hand on the ceramic mug to steady the shake. Maybe she's playing. Maybe, Talia said. And maybe she asked, tapping the arm of the only person in town who listened the last time she asked for help. They went. Of course they did. Maya zipped a thicker wetsuit and tucked a knife into her ankle sleeve like someone who learns from mistakes while promising not to repeat them. Talia drove the Ruthie Ray out the channel with the calm hand of a person who trusts physics and has a healthy fear of luck. The buoy bobbed in the rain in the North Cove like an orange period at the end of a sentence you wish were longer. Sable was there. The matriarch too, hanging back, the curved dorsal like a bent scythe against the flat pewter. The bull farther out as if his job was to watch the road. Sable slid under the surface and shouldered the buoy again. Not hard, not like vandalism, like a nudge at an elbow. Okay, Talia said, breath thin as wire. We see you. Maya slipped into the water. It felt colder than yesterday because the body's courage renews itself slower than the ocean, as demands. She swam to the buoy and ducked under. The chain dropped into green. At 15 feet the color turned church window. At 20 it turned old bottle. At 25 she saw it. A secondary line, newer than the chain, looped with care around the base and leading down to a shape that did not belong where shapes belong. She surfaced, took in 3 slow breaths like she had read in a manual once, dove again, and worked the extra line with the knife. Whoever tied it was good. Quick loops, small pride in the craft. She cut a loop, then another, and the shape below lifted a fraction. Fill of air inside plastic. She worked it free. It started up slow, then faster, buoyancy remembering its job. She guided it with flat palms. The surface broke over a black contractor OS bag sealed with Gorilla Tape as if the person who sealed it believed tape could argue with tide. Talia hooked it with a boat hook and hauled it aboard. The weight said brick or metal. The shape said case. Nick cut the tape. Rain drummed the deck. The world held its breath the way it does when doors about to be opened are not rooms anyone wanted. The Ruthie Ray had produced odd things before. A propeller blade horned with barnacle, a suitcase of rocks and letters, a torso-length root that looked like a snake god if you wanted to see it. This was a black pelican case, the kind you buy when you need a thing to survive a war. Talia popped the latches. Inside, wrapped in shrink film, a GoPro in a clear dive housing, 2 spare batteries sealed in a Ziploc, and a plastic pouch with a key fob labeled with a number that matched the old salvage pier IS padlock. Riley, Talia said, because when a filmographer disappears as a person, his cameras become the ghosts that know the truth. They didn't watch the footage on the boat. You don't handle ghosts in the rain. They called Sheriff Cole. He met them back at the dock with a laptop and a stillness that wasn't calm so much as readiness. The video started at a boat level. Nobody would place a camera unless they expected the camera to see what a person in a panic might miss. Angle low, stern toward the North Cove mouth. Dark, pre-dawn. A red jacket bright as an artery. Voices off frame, men, 2, overlapping, one rough and impatient, one trying to sound calm and arriving at fake. A woman's voice too, clipped, tight, not begging, not yet. Just come here, the rough one said. We need to check the tie. I can't see, the woman said. You won't need to. The camera shifted. A knee bumped the mount, a glance at a hand closing over a wrist. A blur as the lens caught rope. The woman stumbled. The red jacket tilted. The men moved as if to catch her and then didn't. She went over, not a flail, a drop. There is a sound human mouths make when the body takes water it didn't ask for. It is not a scream. It's a curse at physics. The video caught the edge of it and then only the line, taut, cutting a groove into the gunwale. The men leaned together. One held, one reached for a knife in a fast, ugly rhythm of practiced emergency. The camera swung to sky as someone's hip bumped it again. A fin cut outside the mouth. The men swore and dropped to a whisper like children suddenly remembering they were being watched. "You told me nobody comes here," the rough one said. "You told me she'd go down," the fake calm one said. They cut the line. Whatever held below sprang, slack, and then gone. The camera caught a ripple far out, then a white oval. The pod had moved in. Not random, not miracle. Choice. The video stopped. Sheriff Cole didn't speak for a long count. When he did, his voice had a new edge. "We need to talk about this fob," he said. The salvage pier had been padlocked for a year, ever since the county decided Rick Pike was better at promises than results. The key fob opened the gate that opened the catwalk that led to a door that led to a room that used to be about tools, and had lately been about the kind of business the ocean keeps until it doesn't. Inside the office were racks of something that should have been boring and was instead a scream in neat rows. Diving weights, contractor bags, zip ties, bolt cutters, duffel bags, shrink wrap. There is a version of every object that is for work, and a version that is for disappearing work. Sheriff Cole saw the difference. Under a tarp in the corner, 2 barrels that had been in the water long enough to acquire a skin of life, and a stink you couldn't to wash off your hands no matter how hard you wished. The labels had been peeled. The serial stamps had been filed. The contents, when they opened one under a hood with masks the fire department brought, were fish byproduct, and something else you could not name because naming would put a sin on the tongue. Riley's drone case was there, empty. His car was in his driveway, keys under the mat like always. His phone, which had sent no pings since December. The plastic pouch held a second fob with the handle wrapped in red tape. The salvagers labeled their tools by color, like a family that didn't trust itself to share. It took exactly 3 hours for the name Maya Jensen to climb out of the gossip stream into the evidence river. Not because he was caught on the GoPro, he wasn't. He had an alibi that put him at the other end of the harbor warming up a diesel that already knows how to start. But because of the text. The text that lured Maya to the cove that fit the pattern of other lures sent to other do-gooders who could not say no to the coast when it whispered. And because of a debt. The kind that binds people who work water the way Barnacle binds Hull. A payment owed to Rick Pike for a favor on a charter the summer before. A net cut free when nobody was supposed to be fishing. A handshake that felt like it was being watched. Sheriff Cole asked Aaron to come in and tell his story. Aaron came with 3 versions in his pocket and chose the one that sounded most like himself. He didn't know about the text. He didn't know about the fob. He didn't know about the pier. He didn't know Rick had dropped by 2 nights earlier while Maya pretended not to be awake, and the old house absorbed a conversation like a sponge holds the smell of bleach. "Then why did you think she fell in?" Sheriff Cole asked, soft enough that you could pretend it wasn't the question. Aaron's jaw worked like an engine hitting bad gas. "Because she swims," he said. "Because she's careless." "She doesn't text you from closed numbers," Sheriff Cole said. "And she doesn't go to the North Cove before dawn without telling someone who actually deserves her trust." They didn't arrest Aaron that day. This isn't that kind of story. It's the kind where you think you understand the shape and the next tide redraws the edge. 2 days after the buoy, the pod moved south to the shelf where the salmon run curves like a storybook river. Whale watchers followed at a legal distance. Someone on the cliff counted 5 surfacings and a slap that looked like punctuation. Talia faxed old photos to researchers she trusted. Sable's slice was healing. The matriarch kept her distance from recreational boats with an attention you couldn't look away from. On day 3, Sable returned to the North Cove alone. She nosed the buoy less and the pilings more. She swam slow circles around the place where the duffel had snagged. She didn't breach. She didn't spy hop. She waited. Maya went back, this time with the Coast Guard and 3 divers in suits thick enough to turn a person into a machine with breath. She didn't plan to go in. She did anyway because some pulls you don't argue, you answer. The divers gridded the cove floor like they were studying, and the test mattered. They found the place where duffel straps had bruised kelp. They found the cut zip tie that she'd bitten. They found, tucked into a pocket of stone like the cuff of a folded sleeve, a ring with a crack through the band. Maya knew it before anyone said anything. Piper's ring, seen in the missing posters, cheap oval stone, silver-plated. The kind teenagers buy 2 of so they can give one to a friend. The crack was new. The sea had done that, or a person. The sea is a person, if you ask a town like this. They brought it up in a gloved hand. The glove shook. It would have shaken even if it had been made of iron. Sheriff Cole closed his eyes for a count you could see move across his face like shadow. The day after the ring, someone set fire to the salvage pier, low and spreading and timed with the wind. It didn't take. The tide was up and the department was fast enough that the flames were only a rumor with pictures, not a fact with bodies. But the message was legible. Stop prying. Stop pulling. Stop letting whales tell you where your sins are buried. Maya went quiet. She stopped running the ridge trail before dawn. She left the porch light on like she was the kind of person who fears the dark instead of the kind who loves it. She put the lemon tree inside and the house smelled like bitterness and shelter. Aaron slept on the couch even when she offered the bed, and then stopped offering. He talked to the air at night and to himself in the shower and to nobody on his phone where he thought walls couldn't eavesdrop. When she did go to the water, it was daytime and with people. She sat on the Ruthie Ray and watched the line where the sea says not today and the sky pretends to listen. Sable surfaced and turned an eye and would have looked like a mirror if mirrors could weep. "You saved me," Maya said once, voice small, no audience but a whale and a friend. "You saved me." A week passed, then another. The town found a way to keep moving the way towns do when they owe themselves a reckoning they can't afford yet. A fundraiser sold pies for the Hale family and half the people in line were there because they loved Piper, and the other half were there because grief needs to be public to be bearable. And then came the day no one in Greyrock forgets, even the ones who pretend to. A charter called in a mayday at 4:12 p.m. because a boat had rammed them off the north jetty and taken off toward the shelf. A gray center console with a T-top and a missing stern light. The sound of fiberglass against glass fiber has a signature you can pick out of a crowded sound. Bruised passengers, no injuries. Sheriff Cole headed east out of the harbor mouth just as the wind swung north. At 4:29, the Ruthie Ray called a second report. A pod of orcas moving hard toward the south shelf. Sable in front, the matriarch flanking, the bull behind. AV like a cavalry charge if cavalry had been invented by poems. At 4:33, a drone pilot on the bluff uploaded footage faster than the town could whisper. The gray boat skimming 10 yards off Sable's path. Sable turning on a dime only whales and swallows can pull without apology. The matriarch cutting off the gray boat's bow. The bull surfacing behind its stern, so close the prop wash painted his back with white lace for a breath. The gray boat throttled down in a panic that looks like reason. A man stood at the helm in a beanie and a jacket you could smell through your screen if you knew the scent. He shouted, he gestured, he tossed something heavy overboard that made a splash Lord Byron would have written a metaphor about. The whales did not touch the hull. They only circled. They only herded. They only kept the boat in place without ever breaking the laws that say what you can and cannot do to a species that has been in lawsuits longer than some children have been alive. Sheriff Cole arrived with a Coast Guard RIB that treats chop like rumor. They cut between the gray boat and the slope of rock. The man in the beanie reached for a throttle that he'd broken with his own hurry. He looked up and saw a badge and a bow. The face he made was not guilt. It was calculation broken by time. On the RIB, a deckhand watched the water instead of the man. She saw a shape sink where the splash had been. She tapped a diver's shoulder in a gesture that meant everything and nothing, and the diver rolled backward into the cold like a coin dropped into a slot. He found a duffel with tape and weights and something inside that wasn't a case but a bundle of sweaters around a smaller box. He cut and saw metal and plastic and wire and the stupid confidence of a man who watched too many shows about people who get away with it. He brought up a phone. Not Riley's. Piper's. Power sealed with a bag of silica packets as if time and chemistry would take a bribe. The diver also found a red jacket strap and the slice of a zip tie cut in a mouth that remembered biting to breathe. Aaron was not on the gray boat, but his best friend was. And the message record read like someone who had accepted errands in exchange for absolution from a man who was careful about fingerprints but sloppy about friends. The part of the story you believe is not the pod pinning a human boat with whale physics. It's what Maya did next when the town had drawn its lines and prepared its stones. She testified. Not only about the cove, not only about the ring and the buoy and the GoPro. She told the story of 6 months earlier in such plain words that the courtroom did not know where to put its hands. She said she had cut a net around Sable's tail, and after that some nights she could not sleep. Because the gratitude of another animal is not a thing you can file. It hovers over you and asks that your life match it. She told the jury that the day of the cove she had believed she was going to watch whales and instead had watched men. She said she did not know whether Sable saved her because she remembered her, or because Sable saved anything that struggled the way Sable had once struggled. She said intent matters when we rejudging people and pattern matters when we relearning animals. The jury believed enough. They convicted the beanie man and the one who pretended to be calm. They did not convict Aaron. Not then. Not with what they had. He moved out of the cedar house. He moved onto a boat for a while, then off it, then out of sight. That kind of absence glows. 2 months later, the day before the first fireworks of summer, a crew dredging the channel pulled up something that made a deckhand vomit into his sleeve. They shut off the pumps. They called Sheriff Cole. He came. The divers went down in the dark soup that sits under harbors like regret. They found a shape that used to be a person, tied with care. The ring in an evidence bag matched. The remains were Piper. Every woman who had raised her and every man who had betrayed her found out at the same time. Because Greyrock is small and phones outrun officialdom by a wide margin, the case against Aaron found a spine, texts you can't talk out of, purchases you can't explain away, a key fob that opened a life. He pled before trial, not out of remorse, out of bad odds. Maya sat in the back and felt her heart crack in a new place that was not about him at all. It was about the way the ocean will never clean what we do. It will only redistribute it until some creature bumps it with its head and asks a human to pull. By the time the leaves began pretending to change, the Shadowline pod had moved up and down the coast twice. Salmon were late, then plentiful, then late again. A ferry threw a prop and limped to dock. A storm took a boat that had ignored a small craft advisory because pride is windproof until it's not. Talia filmed a sequence of Sable breaching so close to the horizon that the whale looked like the hinge of the world. The video did 1 million views because we live by attention when attention is pointed at the right things. On a morning when the sea looked polished and the town looked forgiven, Maya paddled a kayak out to the North Cove. She did not plan to tip. She had a PFD strapped fine. She had a radio. She had a whistle. She had a body that had learned to be careful without ceding courage. She floated by the buoy and said words into the air that were not about religion, but had more in them than science and law combined. Sable surfaced at the mouth. She did not come in. She marked the line and held it. A mother's geometry. An apprentice's discipline. An intelligence that doesn't check the mirror for human approval before it acts. Maya lifted her paddle in a small salute. The whale did not wave. She does not work for us. She does not audition for our stories. She disappeared, leaving rings that reached the kayak bow like a hand on a shoulder. The kind of touch you feel hours later when you think you've forgotten. There are people who say animals are only instinct and humans are only choice. There are people who say the ocean is an endless forgiveness machine. There are people who say everything is coincidence until something kills us, and even then it was inevitable. Tell those people they can have their theories. But on the day a young orca lifted a woman onto her back and nudged her toward kelp and then led a boat to a black case full of proof, a town learned that witness doesn't always look like a person on a stand. Sometimes witness wears a dorsal fin nicked by what we did to it. Sometimes witness refuses to touch you because the law says don't and still manages to push your life back into your chest. If this story left a mark, let it be this. Respect is not a poster. Keep distance. Know the laws. Learn the seasons. Don't chase. Don't feed. Don't pretend your curiosity is a right. And when the coast whispers, ask what it's asking for and whether you're the right one to answer. Stories like this one swim under the surface in towns like ours. We pull them up gently, we tell them clean, and we sit with what they show us. If you want more of these, true animal mysteries, human choices, the thin places where they touch, subscribe and tap the bell. Like this video so other people find it when the tide pushes them our way. And tell me in the comments, did Sable save a person or did she save something larger that needed saving more? I read everything, I always do.